Hey guys, it's Bold Like a Leopard here again. Ramon talking to you about a topic that I started earlier concerning a CNN panel that was on with Don Lemon, focusing on Nancy Pelosi and whether she should be replaced. I think that they did say something that was correct, which is that you can't place the blame on only one person. And it was true during the Obama administration. You can't just blame Barack Obama for all of the ills in the Democratic Party. He does deserve a massive amount of it because he was the peak of the mountain. That was the best position that anybody in the Democratic Party was in. If you're the executive, if you're the chief executive, you're the head of the country, your political party looks to you as its symbol. They weren't looking, when Barack Obama was president, to Harry Reid or Nancy Pelosi necessarily to be the masthead of the party, to be the flagship of the party, whatever other metaphor you have. However, you still have to distribute some of the blame. And Barack Obama, he was not responsible necessarily for all the congressional failures. I mean, when they were in control of the House from 2006 through 2010, and especially during the Obama administration, 2009 through 2011, that's actually the accurate dates. The Democratic Party didn't push for much. It didn't really pass much legislation. A lot of the legislation that passed, to be honest with you, played into the exact opposite of the Democratic rhetoric. They passed TARP. They passed the shovel ready, all those stimulus packages, cash for clunkers. And instead of giving them the health insurance legislation that they wanted, Barack Obama and his Democratic allies in the Senate and House gave them a system called Obamacare that was designed to fall apart. It was designed to fall apart. I don't know why they thought it was going to be a good idea. If they thought, I think it might have been overconfidence. They might have decided, yeah, we are in power now. We will never lose again. George Bush wrecked the Republican Party's reputation so bad that we don't ever have to worry about losing power again, losing control of either house. And within 2 years, that whole hypothesis fell apart completely. It was the worst legislative defeat in decades. And unlike the previous one in 1994, where the Democrats were just they were abolished, basically. They were, or not abolished, they were they were obliterated. Tom Foley, Tip O'Neill, all those guys were gone. I think Tip O'Neill might have already retired. That was before my time. Unlike in that instance, in 2010, the Democrats opted to keep their leadership and not change anything, which is possibly the dumber move. I think when they brought in new leadership in Congress and like in the 90s, it was at least somewhat of a change, even though Dick Gephardt, to be honest with you, isn't much of a change. So let's talk about some issues of why this is so bad that you can't even just blame Barack Obama or even Nancy Pelosi, even though you do have to tell her to go home if you want anything to change. It says here, this is from today on Real Clear Politics. It says, Democrats, beware the single-payer siren. Sorry. I'm not sure why they're publishing this, but here it goes. It says, Democrats who are giddily munching popcorn while watching Republicans struggling with trying to repeal Obamacare may want to put down the tub. They're on the verge of adopting a politically analogous healthcare plank, one designed to rev up their ideological base in the next campaign, but destined to make the party suffer once more. Last week, Elizabeth Warren, who I call thin-lipped Lizzie, the Massachusetts senator and possible presidential aspirant, declared in a Wall Street Journal interview that after stymieing repeal, the next step for Democrats should be single-payer, a health insurance system with only one main insurer run by the federal government. See, that's where she's wrong. The Democrats didn't stymie the repeal. It was hardcore Republicans like Rand Paul and Mike Lee and Ted Cruz that said, no, we want real repeal. We don't want to pass Obamacare light. So this is already spinning the issue. This is a shift for Warren. She had refused to back single payer in their 2012 Senate run, and it has seismic repercussions for the Democratic Party. Previously, only gadfly Democratic presidential candidates touted single payer. This is really condescension here to the Democratic base. Jerry Brown in 1992, that's not a gadfly. Jerry Brown was a serious contender in 1992. Dennis Kucinich in 2004 and 2008, and Bernie Sanders in 2016. But Sanders graduated from gadfly to heavyweight contender, and in turn, intensity on the left for single payer has grown. This year, for the first time, the perennial Medicare for All bill is being co-sponsored by a majority of the House Democratic caucus. One health policy expert recently told Vox, Democratic politicians I never thought would utter the words have mentioned single payer to me in a non-joking way of late. You can now expect other 2020 presidential candidates to wave the single payer banner. A few days after Warren's move, another possible candidate, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, followed suit. No longer can Democrats breezily wave off Iowa and New Hampshire healthcare activists with pragmatic rationalizations. Democrats will have to embrace single payer to avoid being tagged as ideologically timid or soullessly corporatist, or engage in politically risky trench warfare with the party's left wing. If Warren is on the debate stage, perhaps alongside Sanders, any rejection of single payer will be particularly glaring. There's a part of the Reasoned Pundits analysis where this is, here's somebody who's obviously pointing to himself as, I'm the adult in the room. All you bitches who are calling for single payer don't know what the fuck you're talking about. No, they do know what the fuck they're talking about. They may be wrong, which I think single payer would be a disaster for this country. That's my thought. But they have a point that single payer is a real system, not this fake hybrid capitalism, socialism that Obamacare is, this price-fixed crony capitalism that it is. Single payer would be a real alternative. It wouldn't be this disaster that Obamacare has been. The other alternative, which I am in favor of, is completely repealing Obamacare and possibly privatizing most of these other healthcare infrastructures in our government, such as the VA, and that's what President Trump is I think, going to end up doing to some extent. I don't know if he's going to succeed the whole way. Spend 5 minutes with a committed Bernie-crat, and you will learn that poll after poll shows majority support for single payer. The claim is oversimplified. Poll numbers range widely depending on how the question is worded, and support drops when faced with the prospect of large increases in government spending. So that's a good point. Nevertheless, polls on issues don't necessarily determine who wins elections. Oh, you think? Most voters didn't want to fully repeal Obamacare. Yet we elected a man who pledged to do just that. Well, I think that the problem is that you've been polling the wrong people. Middle-of-the-road voters may not be completely sold on single payer, but we can't know if it would be an election day deal breaker. The big danger single payer presents Democrats wouldn't necessarily manifest on election day, but afterwards. Today's Republicans are in a pickle because they spent 7 years ginning up their base with cries of repeal without putting significant thought into replacement. Nobody knew that health care could be so complicated, whined President Trump, who obviously paid little attention to the legislative process that produced the Affordable Care Act. Well, I think what he was trying to do was to kind of laugh at his own party, which the Republican Party is a joke thanks to Paul Ryan and Bitch McConnell. But that has nothing to do with Obamacare has been a complete clusterfuck. The people that are ignoring the collapse in its infrastructure are the real villains in this. The media that's been covering for the Obamacrats, they are the real villains. It's not the Bernie people. And it's not I mean, it is the Republican leadership, but the Tea Partyists, the opponents of Obamacare, the original opponents, we were saying this. It's not, you can't blame us for warning the American people that this would happen. Initially, Republican legislative leaders planned to buy themselves time and discussed putting off a replacement for as much as 3 years. But because the conservative base had been whipped into such a frenzy, the leaders concluded they had to forge ahead, torpedoes be damned. The result has been slapdash legislation blown to bits by torpedoes from the Congressional Budget Office. Well, the CBO also thought that Obamacare would be solvent, which it hasn't been. So why should we listen to the Congressional Budget Office? Either a faction of Republicans will break ranks and kill the bill, risking charges of betrayal from conservative diehards, or the bill will actually become law, risking anger from millions of voters likely to be saddled with higher health care costs. So, until now, you don't think that it's been a problem that the higher health care costs have been saddled on the Democrats? He's not admitting any fault here. If Democrats take back Congress and the White House on a pledge to enact single payer, they would find themselves in a similar predicament. While expectations of the progressive base would run high, the simplistic talking points of the campaign would run smack into the penalties of healthcare policies. Democrats would not be able to quickly ram through the existing House Medicare for All legislation, which is a wisp thin, not ready for prime time, 30 pages long, and digging into the details would not be pretty. That's why you do the job. That's why you do the job. If you're going to pass something, then you work on it. It doesn't mean this is ridiculous. He's basically saying, oh, it's going to be hard, so we shouldn't even try. Already we've been seeing single-payer pushes founder in deep blue Vermont and California because the upfront costs were steep and few were willing to support the necessary tax increases. The controversial line that greased passage of the Affordable Care Act, if you like your health care plan, you can keep it, would be non-operative well, so you're saying that you can't just lie to people like Obamacare did. Well, maybe you should have thought of that when you supported Obamacare. People currently satisfied with their health insurance would instead be told they would have to give it up for a government plan. The insurance industry would be literally fighting for its life and would spend millions stoking every possible concern anyone could have about a wholesale revision of 1/6 of the United States economy. So this guy doesn't understand that people they don't listen to that anymore. Nobody cares about the health insurance companies, except for people in states like New Jersey and I think Connecticut that are strongholds of it. Could a progressive populist revolution overcome these challenges? One can never say never. But anyone who saw Barack Obama's Democrats had to go through what Barack Obama's Democrats had to go through to barely squeeze the Affordable Care Act through a heavily Democratic Congress, including the subsequent loss of the House, or saw how Hillary Care was destroyed in 1994 by the insurance lobby's Harry and Louise ad campaign, has to be deeply skeptical. Any health reform proposal involves trade-offs that make some people unhappy. At minimum, the process would be a bitterly fought slog, which raises the question, why would progressive activists effectively force the Democratic Party to commit to single payer when there are so many other pressing issues? Well, then name them. Name them. You don't have another issue. This is their issue. This is their issue. They don't have anything else to push. What's the other issue that they're pressing? They're trying to impeach Donald Trump by invoking the 25th Amendment. That's their other issue. That's not an issue that is pressing to the days of to the daily lives of average Americans. Democrats already paid a stiff political price to win a massive expansion in health insurance coverage with a program that can still be refined over time. No, it cannot. No, it cannot. It means you will keep paying huge, massive subsidies and then further bailouts to the insurance industry in order to keep Obamacare alive. This is lying to the progressive base. It's lying to the entire country, including conservatives, when you say that you can keep Obamacare and improve on it. There's nothing to improve on. It is a deficient system, and Donald Trump is right to talk about fully repealing it. Why bet the House and the Senate on a sequel when there is plenty to do on jobs, wages, climate, immigration, and civil rights? Because They don't have a jobs agenda. They don't have a wages agenda. They don't have a climate agenda. They don't have an immigration agenda. And they don't have a civil rights agenda. They have nothing. They have absolutely nothing. The most that they have is a healthcare agenda. Everything else that they have is trash. Nobody bought any of their other positions in the last election, so why do you expect to sell them the same shit next time? The mover on healthcare loses. To do something is to lose, warned battle-scarred Democratic operative James Carville earlier this year. Republicans failed to heed his warning. Democrats who have repeatedly gone through the healthcare ringer shouldn't need a reminder. James Carville is a spokesman for the 90s Democrats. He's a Clintonian. He's a spokesman for the wing of the party that does nothing and is basically just saying, well, we're the best thing that's not Republican, so you should vote for us. That's why I can say that I'm not as worried about Donald Trump failing as some other people are, because this is his opposition. It's these incompetent morons. James Carville had one victory that he was involved in, the 1992 presidential election, where basically he was running against wet noodle George Bush Sr., who was hampered significantly by the Ross Perot independent run. So I hardly call him some political genius. So it says here, Bill Schur is executive director of Liberal Oasis and a contributor to Real Clear Politics. So we're talking about mainstream liberal here. Now, like I said, this is blatant lying to the progressive base. They should have the right to define the agenda as they see fit. They shouldn't be tethered to these corporate whores that are what the Democratic Party has been composed of under the Obama and Clinton administrations. So we're going to move on to a similar topic of just the Democrats poaching each other. This is Rahm Emanuel, the mayor of Chicago. He says, in Chicago, the trains actually run in time. Ditka, doubles. That's his platform. Doubles. That's Rahm Emanuel. He doesn't have a real idea to pitch. He's, hey, Rahm Emanuel, what's your idea for reforming the city education system? Doubles. Shit. Then there's the whole crime issue where his city is basically a new Bosnia in the middle of the Midwest. He says, on Thursday, in the wake of a subway derailment and an epidemic of train delays, Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York declared a state of emergency for the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, the busiest mass transit system in America. That same day, the nation's third busiest system, the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, handed out coupons for free coffee to riders stuck in the second year of slowdowns caused by repairs to prevent chronic fires. Meanwhile, in Chicago, a recent survey found that 85% of passengers are satisfied with service on our transit system, the nation's second most used. So then he goes and he says, he lists all these statistics about how we're so fucking good, we're Chicago. How have we done it? First, we put reliability ahead of expansion. We focused relentlessly on modernizing tracks, signal switches, stations, and cars before extending lines to new destinations. Unlike New York, which has spent billions to reach Hudson Yards, or Washington, which is concentrated on trying to reach Dulles Airport, Chicago has improved the existing system. So this is a whole article where he throws shade on two other cities, New York and Washington, D.C. And then he says, but even though we're doing our best, Chicago, like every municipal transit authority, needs federal support. Rather than tweeting about violence in Chicago, President Trump should be looking to Chicago as a model for the infrastructure investments and model growth he wants to replicate across the country. Instead of embarking on his wrong-headed plan to privatize infrastructure construction, he should expand existing programs that have used local federal partnerships to build transportation systems. Chicago has modernized its system thanks in part to the Federal Transit Administration's core capacity improvement program, which funds upgrades to existing corridors that are at or over capacity today or will be in 5 years. Congress should double funding for the program to allow America's busiest mass transit systems to meet rising demand. It should also expand the low-interest federal infrastructure loans that have helped Chicago to rebuild rail lines and airports and to create the downtown Riverwalk. So, what do we get from this? When Chicago's elevated train first soared above the streets and between the skyscrapers 125 years ago, it captured the imagination of Americans and visitors from around the world who rode its wooden cars to the 1893 World's Fair. It's a lesson for us all. The only way to keep a city moving forward is to invest in its future. Now, hold on, let's read some comments. Here it says it's like comparing the New York Yankees to a minor league AA baseball team. More than 70% of Chicagoans commute by car. The CTA is simply not a vital piece of transportation infrastructure. It could be shut down and the vast majority of Chicagoans could still get to work. Then this other guy, and in Chicago, the city is on a tax craze. This other guy said, he says he's from USA. To the negative commenters, go ahead and criticize Chicago for what you don't like about it, but can you not also acknowledge that they're doing something right? And maybe learn from what they've done, or does someone have to be perfect before we listen? Then this guy from New York says, Dear Governor Emanuel, oh, you gave him a promotion. I have been into Chicago many times, and I enjoy taking the train to Wrigley Field from my daughter's apartment. The trains do run well, and the subway riders are actually polite. However, the Chicago train system just does not have the charm and the edge of the New York City subway system. I would always prefer the 6 train over the Red Line. And then it says, this guy, William Smallshaw, at least Rahm accomplished one thing. The city is bankrupt and has the highest murder rate in the country, and his friends are enriching themselves. Rahm seems to be hanging his legacy on something of consequence. Trains run on time, or in time. Typical urban elite disconnected from reality. Then this other guy is complaining that St. Louis and Memphis have murder rates that are higher than Chicago. Well, we're talking about the areas of Chicago that are gripped by murder, okay? Here, tired of hypocrisy. The trains run on time. Wasn't that also a boast from a long-dead European dictator? I think that's Mussolini. So, let's get back to this. Rahm Emanuel has bankrupted not just his city, Chicago, but the entire state of Illinois. They're running a special session of Illinois' Senate and House right now just to deal with this massive debt that they're in. They're going bankrupt. They're trying to file for bankruptcy, and he's boasting about how he got the trains to run on time in the city thanks to federal grants. So who the fuck is he kidding? So that's one of the other symptoms. He goes on here, he throws shade at other Democrats in New York State and Washington, Governor Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio, who are also colossal retards, and he expects people to lick his asshole. That's basically his approach to running the city. And what does he do? He publishes the op-ed in the New York Times. Not in Chicago Tribune. He publishes in the New York Times. So what does that tell you about the editorial line of the New York Times? They're willing to get this failed Democrat who's run his state into the ground. They're willing to have him write an op-ed in order to throw shade on their own mayor and governor. This is definitely a sign of a media that's basically caving to the whims of liberals that are looking after their own ambition. Then you have this mess over here, which is by Brent Budowsky, this establishment columnist working for The Hill. I think I've seen him on RT debating Lionel Nation. Lionel, if you watch his channel, I greatly recommend him. And he says, watching the latest vulgar and sexist outburst of Donald Trump, who temporarily occupies the Oval Office and has now turned his foul mouth against Mika Brzezinski, let me suggests an idea that is offered very seriously. Former Republican congressman and current MSNBC host Joe Scarborough, who is a serious and principled conservative, even if he makes too many snide... How can he be a principled conservative if he works for MSNBC? Even if he makes too many snide comments about liberals from the Upper East Side and Georgetown, should enter the GOP primaries and run against Trump in the 2020 presidential campaigns. While the thought of former President Trump someday glued to the television, watching CNN and MSNBC, and then writing angry, vulgar tweets about future President Joe Scarborough and his First Lady Mika has its own appeal, the idea of a principled conservative replacing by, get your editor to check this, Budowsky, replaced by succeeding an unprincipled vulgarian. This is an incoherent sentence. Should have even greater appeal to Republicans who will vote in the 2020 primaries. Scarborough is a serious man. He served in the House of Representatives as a Republican and conservative and has a body of knowledge and experience that far surpasses any understanding of policy and issues that Trump will ever possess. Where? Who knows anything that Joe Scarborough has ever said that is even remotely coherent and hard-cutting? He's an idiot. He's a moron. You know what? I'm going to tweet this to Lionel. Every day on Morning Joe, Scarborough offers the kind of critique of Trump that every serious Republican and conservative should offer themselves and respect in a presidential candidate. As for Trump's low-end and vulgar tweets about Mika Brzezinski, they are sick but not surprising. Any person who saw Trump in his infamous Access Hollywood video say things about women that editors would not permit to be quoted verbatim in family newspapers knew then and there that what kind of man our current president is. It is fair to ask the most prominent leaders of the Christian conservative movement whether they will firmly and belatedly condemn Trump's behavior toward Brzezinski and other women Trump has berated and insulted. Will Vice President Pence be embarrassed the next time he meets the press or faces the nation and is asked for his verdict on Trump's bizarre and vulgar behavior? If Scarborough were to run for president, he could run against Trump as a Reagan Republican who does not praise dictators from Russia to the Philippines. He could run against Trump and promise he would not humiliate his Secretary of State by promising to cut the budget for the State Department by 30%, as Trump has done, or permitting a laughably inexperienced son-in-law to act like a shadow Secretary of State, as Trump does every day. Well, how about President Clinton sending Jesse Jackson to Africa to act as his shadow Secretary of State? How about that? How about it? How about President Obama sending Al Sharpton to Ferguson to act as his surrogate? Former Congressman Scarborough could credibly pledge that after he has served in the White House for 6 months as Trump has done, he would be able to perform much better than Trump, who has been unable to pass through Congress even one major piece of legislation since January. Think about it. A Republican president with a Republican House and Republican Senate has been unable to pass and enact into law even one major piece of legislation through January, March, April, May, and June of his first term. And Trump compares himself to the great American presidents in history with this record. Well, what did Joe Scarborough? He served in Congress. What's his signature piece of legislation? I mean, you're saying he should run on his record. What's his signature piece of legislation? So then he goes on. He says Scarborough would be a strong and serious candidate. So would Ohio Governor John Kasich if he were to run. And Kasich acts as though he may be considering it. So would any number of Republican governors or Republican senators who are better leaders and better men and women than Trump. What Republicans need is a better standard bearer than Trump for their party. What Democrats and Americans need is a different president, a man or woman who is fit to lead our nation and the free world. The sooner this happens, the better. Trump's vulgarity towards Brzezinski offers one more reason that Donald Trump is by far the most unpopular new president since George Washington and stains the office with his presence. First of all, how do you talk about popularity when you're going back to George Washington when there were no polls. It says, Budowsky was an aide to former Senator Lloyd Benson of Texas and Representative Bill Alexander of Arkansas. He holds, this law degree from London School of Economics. Let me unload on this. First of all, why Joe Scarborough? Why don't you say Mika Brzezinski should run for president? She was born here. She's a U.S. citizen. Why are you saying Joe Scarborough should run? She's the daughter of a former secretary of, I think it was a national security advisor, Zbigniew Brzezinski, who himself is he just died last year, was one of the worst advisors. He was responsible for the failed rescue mission in Iran. So why that? That's first of all. Why should it be Scarborough? If Brzezinski was the one who was directly insulted, why are you going for Scarborough to run for president? What are you, sexist? Are you sexist, Brent Budowsky? So let's run down some of these things. His calling Joe Scarborough a principled conservative. Joe Scarborough isn't a principled anything. And his whole shtick where he's talking about principled, he's talking about liberal elites on the Upper East Side in Georgetown. He is now part of that liberal elite. He's not living in Pensacola. He's been in the media since the late 90s. Okay? And clearly he's getting, first of all, he is probably hiding several skeletons that Trump is gradually releasing. He's not going to be a viable candidate for anything. Not this year and not next year. Neither is Mika Brzezinski. They're two jokes. It's the same as when people suddenly started calling Megyn Kelly a principled conservative last year when she was criticizing Trump, or I think it was in 2015. She started criticizing Trump, and the media was rushing to defend her. They were saying, "Oh, we can stop Trump if we support Megyn Kelly." It was soon revealed that she doesn't have anybody behind her. There is no public behind her. It's all media static that's getting behind her. This cheerleading. He says, First Lady Mika. Yeah, whatever. Scarborough is a serious man. He served in the House of Representatives as a Republican and a conservative. You didn't name one achievement that he had. I think he served for like 6 years and did virtually nothing. Then he asks the leaders of the Christian conservative movement whether they will firmly and belatedly condemn. No, they won't, because when they're getting condemned, remember when a couple months ago they were jumping on Mike Pence, the person that he's now asking to feel embarrassed. They were jumping on Mike Pence because he would only have dinner with his wife. He wouldn't have dinner with another woman alone. They were jumping on her. So are you now calling on him to step up? Okay. He could run against Trump as a Reagan Republican who does not praise dictators from Russia to the Philippines. Well, he could also run as a media elite that has been completely in the bubble of corporate America for the past 15 or so years. He's been working for MSNBC for years. Nobody in America, especially conservative America, would back even a former Republican who is on MSNBC. Nobody trusts MSNBC. We hate it. Anybody who's a conservative or a Republican, whatever you want to call it, a critic of the liberal establishment. Even some liberals don't trust MSNBC. It's garbage now. Then he goes and tries to throw shade on Trump for his accomplishments because he hasn't gotten any legislation passed. Well, it's not his job. Let me tell you what his accomplishments are. He did do the travel ban, which is now probably going to be completely reinstated. It's been temporarily reinstated by the Supreme Court. It will probably end up being completely reinstated in the fall. Then, if that's not enough, he torpedoed the TPP. He withdrew from the Senate, from the Paris Climate Accord. He did get the new health care bill passed through the House, which President Obama couldn't get health care passed at all until 2010, which was about a year and a half into his term. What are some other things he's done? He's gotten border crossings way, way down. The stock market is at an all-time high. You could talk about all of the perceived victories that the Democrats have given to him by, contesting everything from those special elections that they have lost to him, to all these lawsuits against him that have gone up they've gone up in smoke. You could talk about his his support of Brexit. They don't have anything. Look, just because Congress hasn't been able to accomplish much doesn't mean that that's on Donald Trump. And, last week the Cates Law got passed by the House. Okay, so what are you blaming him for them passing the law now? It could be that in the next few weeks, if he can, look, he's already got the wind at his backs now that CNN is on the defensive. So if they pass any of these laws this week, then just one of them, the Cates Law or the Sanctuary Cities Law, then his whole article just goes up in smoke. It doesn't mean anything. Then he goes and mentions John Kasich as a principled conservative. Nobody in Ohio even cares about John Kasich anymore. He won one primary in 2016. Nobody wanted him to actually be president. They just wanted to stop Trump at the time. Then in the actual election in Ohio, Trump destroyed Hillary Clinton. So there's obviously no advantage he has. If he were to run again in 2016, he wouldn't even forget carrying Ohio. I don't think he would even come close to beating Donald Trump here. And he doesn't have a public behind him. He's basically inflated by the media. He's like Megyn Kelly. He's like all of these people that the media inflates in order to attack Trump. He's a Jeb Bush type candidate. So that's it for Brent Budowsky. This might be the dumbest article of the day, and I'm going to share it with Lionel. And then finally, we have Maureen Dowd of the New York Times, who was basically on her knees for 8 years for Barack Obama. And she said, so with this latest toe jumping from our president's mouth, is Donald Trump acting like a sexist pig or simply a pig? I prefer a pig. And then she goes on to defend both Brzezinski and Scarborough and whatever. Some, including Scarborough, think Trump goes after women harder. Whatever here. She starts, calling him the National Choir, which has been giving Trump the Il Duce treatment while sliming his political opponents. Well, if Donald Trump knows something about these press people, and they're always trying to, if you're going to be adversarial towards the president, then he's going to be adversarial back. And if all this stuff gets out, then their careers are just they're going to be jokes. They're going to be jokes. And then she brings up, Trump has always been obsessed with looks, his own, men's and women's. One of his favorite phrases is, here's the beauty of me. He walks through life as though he's the judge in an 80s swimsuit contest, even with his own wives and older daughters. She's got the best body, was his typical refrain about Ivanka. I was at the Times in New York in 1999 when Trump, talking to an editor, commented admiringly on a sexy buff picture of Anna Wintour in a white wife beater on the cover of New York Magazine. She will never look this good again, Trump proclaimed to the male editor. Well, New York Magazine, which is published by liberal elites in New York, they published it, and they obviously published these sexy pinup models in their catalogs or in their on their front page covers because they're selling sex just like all the rest of the media. Trump blasted his way up in the 2016 campaign by mocking his opponents' looks, male and female. At a New Jersey fundraiser, Trump teased Chris Christie, no more Oreos. Well, he was just made fun of yesterday for being a beached whale on New Jersey's shore, the Jersey Shore. So is that just Trump? He made fun of Jeb for ditching glasses for contacts.
And Rick Perry, when he put glasses on, he belittled little Marco for sweating. This is hilarious. This is, I mean, so then he's being consistent. He's being consistent, and she's arguing that he's being consistent. He famously and viciously mocked Times reporter Serge Kovaleski for his disability. That's actually been debunked. It has nothing to do with his... He's used that gesture on people that are not disabled before. And his aides think John Bolton lost his shot at Secretary of State due to his Yeti mustache. That is also unsubstantiated nonsense that she's basically, just putting out there. He is mean to men as well as women, says Trump biographer Michael D'Antonio. When he was planning to run for president in 2014, he required males and females in his organization to get in shape, and back in the 90s, Donald would hand out tubes of Rogaine to male executives and say the worst thing in the world is for a male executive to go bald. Certainly, Trump is squeamish about bodily functions. He once bragged to Howard Stern that Melania seemed impervious to bathroom needs, and he weirdly found it disgusting that Hillary took a bathroom break during a debate. Bodily fluids bother him. D'Antonio says, the famous germaphobe once complained to me about the time a man came out of a New York restaurant bathroom with wet hands and shook his hand. Trump said he couldn't eat after that. Well, if he's a germaphobe, then what's your problem? Maybe that's a psychological hang-up. A lot of people are germaphobes. Who cares? I gave Trump the benefit of the doubt after his comment on Megyn Kelly about plumbing. No, you didn't. But later, a longtime Trump associate told me that Trump had practiced that line before he said it on CNN, and that it was meant to evoke an image of Kelly as hormonal. Of course, since Trump and some of those close to him have such an elastic relationship with the truth, and since some staffers have been known to feed journalists false details just to mess with them, you can never be sure of anything that comes out of this White House, except the cruelty. So, I know I've run very long on this one video, but I wanted to get it all out of the way. The media is literally puking all sense of reason out on this 4th of July weekend. And I was just watching this news show, Glorious, or what is it called? The Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, Glow. And he's basically using all of this hype and glitz and whatever as his weapon against them, because that they need that type of sensationalism and hyperbole, and they're basically putting it in all of their columns. I've read here, the one about the single-payer health care. That's the only one that actually, they're basically saying, no, don't talk about real policy. It's just going to get you in trouble. If you really try to push single-payer health care, you're just going to get in trouble. People will get bored, or they're going to get scared of single-payer health care. No. Stay the safe topics. Stay in the safe space. That was their message. Then I went through Rahm Emanuel, the idiot, who has his city and state bankrupt due to his retarded spending habits, talking about trains. Talk about trains. That's his big pitch. Then I had Brent Budowsky saying that Joe Scarborough, this incoherent nutcase, should be the Republican candidate next time for president. Which is not going to happen. Joe Scarborough has about as much of a chance of winning the Democratic nomination as he has of the Republican nomination. And then, what was the fourth one? Well, it was this one, the Maureen Dowd piece. These people are out of their minds. Maureen Dowd should go, she should take a flight to Indonesia so she can give some pleasure to her, her high school crush, Barack Obama, the guy, the one that she basically wrote adolescent love letters to for 8 years. She should go fuck herself. Donald Trump is the president, and he's basically owning them. The next time that they lose, they're going to have themselves to blame. If he wins the midterms, he is going to be reelected. Even people, I've had plenty of criticisms for him, but at this point, why would anybody listen to me talk about my preferences for the healthcare system, my preferences for foreign policy, when you have these squawking banshees coming out every day with their idiotic, gripes about you know, blood and whatever and everything. These people are retarded. They just don't know when to stop. They're gluttons for punishment. They just want more punishment from this president. And that's where I'll leave you today. Maybe I'll have a couple more videos this evening and tomorrow. Until then, stay bold. This is Bold Like a Leopard. And happy July 4th. Happy Independence Day.